All right, everyone. We have got the community survey. Sorry for the late notice. I have been busy working on some miniatures. So life got a hold of me. When I did have my spare time, I've been working on some miniatures. I did want to take some time and review the community survey results just to sort of see where we're at. So just going through here, I have July of 2024. I would say this like 2024 was I think a pretty huge year for OPR. And I think, yeah, a lot has gone on, and I think that's reflected in the survey. So the first thing I think we're going to see here, and we're going to notice is about 200 more responses. So 1,600 up from 1,400, and that is a pretty big deal. Like that's substantial growth to get really 200 additional responses when 14 was already the largest community survey. To sort of get 200 more responses is pretty good growth, I think. Let's just go into what we see here. So one thing I think that we're going to see here, we're getting a flood of new people. I think the thing that happened last year that I notated here is that the new people coming into OPR were really sort of more 40K people. You could just tell by how they were answering. They really were people who were sort of former 40K players. But we're going to see here, these new people we're getting in these past 6 months, I would say aren't 40K players. So while when July came out, we get some growth. That growth from the survey answers, we can sort of pick that it was 40K players. These new people coming in, they don't seem to be 40K players. They seem to be almost new wargamers, or people who really haven't been playing additional war games. So one thing we're going to see here is when we look at here, we're going to see a lot of these people coming in. One, they aren't using the OPR site as a percent here, but the newsletter, this is a pretty interesting thing here, that the newsletter has had a substantial increase in popularity. I think the newsletters, I think that they've been a good source of news, and I think that's really good for internal one-page rules. I think if I was in one-page rules, I'd be happy to see this, that more people are starting to use their newsletter. Discord seems to have dropped down a decent amount. I mean, it's 5%, so people maybe... Discord still seems to be pretty strong, but Discord's not quite... People actually seem to be turning a lot more towards Patreon. So you could just see here the drop in Discord, and actually these new people are more and more starting to go to the official OPR channels like the newsletter and the Patreon here. Instagram, Reddit, and Facebook are about the same. Facebook dropped down a decent amount, actually. I think that just Facebook in general has been losing popularity. YouTube has dropped down by a decent amount. I don't know. It's like I said, these people coming in, they seem to be sort of new to wargaming in general, so maybe they aren't interested in some of these other channels. They seem to be getting a lot of their information directly from One Page Rules Direct. And like if I was an internal One Page Rules, I'd be very happy to see. Yeah, I think they're even happy to see the newsletter has grown a lot. Yeah, that's great. I think that's again, if I was an OPR, I'd be happy to see that. All right, what games do we play? So what are these people coming in? Well, they're playing Grimdark Future. Still seems to be holding strong at 70. Look at this. But these new people, they're really interested in playing Firefight. Has had a huge jump. So we're going to see here, a lot of these new people coming in these past 6 months are real casual players, and they're really starting out playing Grimdark Future Firefight. Warfleets has seen a little bump. Actually, it's stayed about the same. 14% is about the same. StarQuest. So this is another one here. We haven't seen StarQuest, but we can say that that's a pretty significant amount. That 25% of them are playing StarQuest. Again, that's a small model count. Age of Fantasy has stayed about the same. I mean, it's gone up, but it's about 47%. Skirmish has gone up, but it's about the same. Regiments has gone up a decent amount. I think there's been some good changes. I've been wanting to cover some of the changes for regiments. I think they've generally been good, so it's good to see some popularity increase in regiments, but, nothing major. Age of Fantasy Quest has slightly decreased, but then again, maybe some of Star Quest is eating. So maybe the two quests are starting to eat into each other. It's hard to say. Yeah, and then another thing is, yeah, maybe people are just coming in just to check out OPR games. So maybe these guys are just really new players. Yeah, so that's good. That's good. There still seems to be very much stronger interest in the grimdark future setting. So even though we're getting a lot of new people coming in, those new players, as we're going to see, still seem to be interested in grimdark future. But I mean, Age of Fantasy is still it's still in the mix. How often do you play? So this is one of the questions that I'm very interested in seeing, and I have to say, I think it's still going in the right direction. So slightly less. So you can see 3+ times a week, 14. It's gone down to 13%. But the 1 to 2 times a week, which I think is sort of the gold standard, has gone up by a percent, 14.5 to 15.5. So that's generally speaking good. That the new people that we're getting in, they seem to be playing the game. Another thing is we see this 1 to 2 times a month. It's actually dropped down to 29%. So that's actually a good thing, that the people we are having coming in, number one, people are playing OPR more often, and that's just a good thing. It's a good thing to see people play that more often. And two, even the new people we have been coming in, they're playing more often. So I think this is just generally a good sign, right? That we're just seeing we're seeing some slight increases where people are just playing, even like the 3+ times a month has gone up a decent amount. Whereas like the people who are playing less often, you're starting to actually see that drop. So it's all good. It's all good. People are playing OPR games more often. I think that's great. Where do we play? And this is indicative of this new group of people. Game stores, library, it's all the same. But look at this. Huge increase at games played at home here. 82% was always big, but actually to go up 2% at being such a highest. So this is this flood of people who are casual players. And these people, they don't seem to be the existing 40K players. They seem to be new players, and they're playing at their house. Not a bad thing. I don't think that's bad. But like I said, the game stores are still holding strong. Increases, like I said, it's generally fine. Online has dropped a decent amount. I know I play online, but I haven't got a chance to these last months. But I still think that's great. But we are seeing, like I said, this is a big change from last year's. We're getting a lot of newer players, and these newer players, maybe they don't have an established game store. So what are they playing? Well, they seem to be playing Firefight. They seem to be playing Quests and Grimdark Future. But you can see there's been big jumps in the smaller scale games. So that seems to translate to some of these newer players who maybe they're just starting their collections, and so they're playing the smaller games. Hey, that's great. That's awesome. All right, let's look at community events. So a pretty big increase in casual events. Again, these new players coming in, we can actually see it almost correlate. These 200 additional people seem to be almost all, there's obviously, I'm oversimplifying things, okay? But you can imagine these 200 new people coming in, they're interested in local casual game events. That's good that they're interested in it. Painting, they're interested in painting. Competitive is still there. I mean, like I said, it's holding up around, I think there's another chart that said about 40%. So the competitive theme seems to be holding up around 35, 40%. Casual game nights. So they're interested in going to conventions, but as you can see, it's as the percent slightly dropped. These new people coming in are primarily interested in casual events. And that may change, like maybe as they play, and to me, that's fine. I think that as you play OPR, the more experience you get in the game, I always think the more naturally you want to start going to the competitive side. So I think it's great that these new players, they just want to start playing casually, and that's awesome. But like I said, generally speaking, the competitive side have basically it's still there. Hobbying, there's an increase in hobbying, an increase in casual events. So again, we have a lot of new people coming, and they are showing what they want to do, and they want to be casual players, which is great. All right, here's another thing. So where are these new players coming from? Well, they don't seem to be 40K players. Actually, that has dropped pretty precipitously, right? 63%. This was, again, 6 months ago, we got a lot of new 40K players, or I would say Games Workshop, let me be clear. But now it's actually dropped off as a percent. We're getting a lot more people who are brand new to the game. And we see this, a huge increase in 3D, OPR 3D printed miniatures. So not only are they 3D printed, but these guys are actually OPR 3D printed miniatures. So, like if I was OPR, I'd be very happy because a lot of the people coming into their game are actually printing OPR miniatures and they're self-printing them. The buying at a store, so there seems to be, like I said, there hasn't, the bought other places has still been pretty slow. Other 3D printed miniatures slightly increased. That's, something. But as we can see, a big growth this past 6 months has been not only new players, but new players who are actually just buying into the OPR 3D printed miniatures. So I think that's great. I think that's awesome. Yeah. And I know myself, I've been working on some OPR miniatures as well. So I guess I can be in that crew because, and I like OPR miniatures. I think that they've been just really solid. So yeah, let's go. How do you buy? How do you usually buy physical miniatures online? So these new people seem to be interested in buying online. Game stores seems to be about the same. And then I don't buy physical miniatures, slightly up. So again, these people are generally interested in buying the miniatures online and self-printing them. Are you interested in buying... Now this has changed, I think, because it's hard to actually view these two graphs because I know they actually changed it to allow multiple answers. So the data isn't going to correlate here. I think the big thing that we can't... basically, we can't compare these two because this was a single choice question. This was allowed multiple choices here. So the data isn't going to correlate. But the big thing I see here is that around 55% of people weren't interested in buying physical OPR miniatures. That seems to be slightly down, but it still seems to be around 55 to 60% of the community aren't interested in buying physical OPR miniatures. Now, you can also look at it the other way and say, well, 45% of them are. And yeah, that's fine. That's still pretty healthy amount of people who are interested. 45% of the community is interested in buying physical miniatures from OPR. All right, what kinds of physical miniatures? A big increase in actually pre-assembled single miniatures and a drop in kit bashing. So again, it looks like these new people who are coming into OPR, they're not interested in kit bashing and doing a lot of work. They basically just want to print their miniatures and start playing. So their interest is actually increased substantially into just, I don't want to do a lot of kit bashing work. I just want to print my miniatures and start playing. And I think that's great. And again, we see the 41% of people seem to just not be interested in buying physical miniatures. So a lot of 3D printers, a lot of digital printers here in OPR. And a lot of them, as we see, a big increase has actually gone into, I don't want to kit bash, I just want to print my miniatures and start playing. So that seems to be, again, indicative of just new players. So physical books wasn't on this, so we can't really compare. So Dungeons and Dragons, so we didn't see these comparisons. Let's look at the Grimdark Future Army. So this has been a huge change, and I think this is we can sort of see a storyline in this data. New players are coming to OPR. They seem to just be new to wargaming, and I can speak anecdotally for myself. We've actually had a big growth in people playing in my local community, and a lot of them are also just new players. So that's good. So what do we look here? So one, we're going to see here is that the OPR model lines have had substantial increases. So a huge jump in alien hives. 5% jump in alien hives is pretty huge. Battle Brothers they've increased, but they've stayed about the same. Blessed Sisters, Custodians, all the smaller armies have stayed about the same. Dwarf guilds as well. High-up fleets have dropped off a good amount. So of all the even though there's a lot of people playing OPR, high elf fleets as a percent have dropped down, which is strange. I don't think the High Elf Fleet's army was particularly good. So maybe that was a softer. Like I said, they seem to still be there, but the big increase, and I think this is speaking not just to the miniatures but to the army design, was in Human Defense Force. So just a massive increase in Human Defense Force, and I think that one, the models are good, and two, I think the human like the High Elf Fleet's redesign I don't think was good. But the Human Defense Force was good. And I think that it's showing in these numbers. Human Defense Force have become a much better army. They've got the miniatures to support them. And man, they're just rocking right now. We'll see how Human Defense Force are in 6 months. We've generally seen, like, after 6 months an army comes out, they start to, cut down. So we'll see about that. But yeah, that's big. A lot of the armies stayed the same. Prime Brothers, slight increase. This is basically probably shuffling. Basically, the Battle Brothers and Prime Brothers, they're just all sort of just people just shuffling around. Robot Legions, again, a substantial increase in Robot Legions. Like 2.5% is pretty big. So, and again, these people who are coming in, look, also, Saurian Stalkros, the significant increase. All of the armies that are, one, good in OPR, and two, have OPR models. I think also they've ran some promotions. I know this past year, like, OPR did some sort of promotions where they ran like alien hives, and I think robot legions. Blessed Sisters, I don't know. Like I said, they've actually been holding strong. So, but I do know that, like, a lot of people now, they've come into OPR and they're playing Robot Legions, they're playing Alien Hives, and they're playing Human Defense Force. So that's good. Wormhole Legions. All the other armies tend to be staying the same. The one outlier, I think, is High Elf Fleets, which didn't see a lot of growth in there. And like I said, I do think they could have done a little better in that redesign. All right, let's look at Age of Fantasy. A lot of it stayed the same. Duchies of Vinci had a huge increase. Again, this is, if I was an internal OPR person, I'd be very happy because it means that their promotions seem to be working. I know they've been running. They had they've been running a lot of stuff, so I can't remember everything. But I do know they've pushed Duchies of Vinci. Duchies of Vinci is a good army, and it seems to be showing. A lot of it's just general increases. Saurians have increased, but not that much. Again, they didn't have a push. Vampiric Undead has actually held strong. Remember, Vampiric Undead was a much older army. The fact that this thing is still held strong at 35, great models, good army. I go back to it. If you want an army to be successful, good models, but the army itself also has to be good. So you can't just create cool models. You've got to have a good army behind that. And I think that Vampiric Undead it's a really powerful army, and it's got good models. So it's still holding strong. Wood Elves, yeah, a substantial increase in Wood Elves. We'll see how that goes. I think the Wood Elf, the model line has been good and the army is good, so we'll see how Wood Elves continue to do. But that's a really good thing to see. All right, generally speaking, like I said, we've seen a big growth. And again, the data seems to be saying that a lot of this growth in OPR seems to be coming from people who are just sort of new to wargaming, and they are just sort of entering from the OPR channel. They're playing with OPR models and with OPR armies, and they are generally getting their information from OPR traditional channels, which is good. Warfleets has generally stayed the same. Human Defense Force is a slight bump. It's hard to sort of judge Warfleets because it's such a relatively smaller percentage. But there has been increases in Alien Hives and Battle Brothers, Blessed Sisters. Yeah, I mean, it's getting around there. But then again, some of these numbers are so small that maybe there is some higher ticks than others. StarQuest isn't... I'm not a StarQuest person, but here are... I guess we'll compare them. But here are the StarQuest classes. I guess you can check it out and see. I don't know the game, so I can't really judge what this means, but there you go. Quest classes. overall seems to be staying the same, I think. Magic users seem to have an increase. I don't play these games at all, so I don't quite know if this is a good or a bad thing. So they didn't. This is a shorter survey, so they didn't put this in here. All right. So what can we talk about here? So generally speaking, the storyline is that in July, the mid 2024, we got a lot. So first of all, we got a lot of new players, and OPR continues to grow. I think in July 2024, the new players were coming from the Games Workshop side of things. Now we did see people come from Games. Like I want to be clear, Games Workshop players continue to grow. I think when we look at the Games Workshop miniatures, we are still getting people coming from Games Workshop. But I think that the big growth this past 6 months has been in just really new players coming to use. In fact, you can actually just see here, we are still getting Warhammer players. I mean, 873 to 949 is still like, in other words, we are still sort of we're still sort of getting those players. They're still coming from Games Workshop. I think it's just the fact that we had so many new players come in that's sort of underlying. In other words, people are still leaving Games Workshop and they're still coming to OPR. That's shown. It's just the big growth this past 6 months has been in the OPR self-printed. And I think that's very encouraging because one, OPR has really, these past 6 months, they have really been doing a lot of promotions. I know they had promotions with Mini Wargaming, and they've been releasing their campaigns and their boxes. So the fact that the community is responding to that, I think, is really good. So in general, I think this has been great. A lot of growth, and I think it's the fact that the growth is happening in OPR lore and miniatures is really great. All right, thanks everyone. Let me know your thoughts.